Watermarks in the rainy night. Have you ever noticed unexplainable wet footprints on a dry floor, or heard the faint sound of water dripping when all faucets are closed? Some say it's just the mind playing tricks, but I know better. I've learned that sometimes water marks the boundary between our world and something else entirely. I've worked at an import warehouse in Mexico City for nearly 5 years now. I usually cover the afternoon shift from 1 to 7 p.m. We used to close later around 9, but after recent events, management decided to close earlier for safety reasons. The warehouse sits in an industrial district south of the city, one of those isolated areas that bustle with activity during the day but turn eerily quiet after dark. My name is Carmen, and I never believed in ghost stories until 3 years ago. The warehouse is a long, spacious structure with narrow, symmetrical aisles and metal shelving units that reach the ceiling. The light comes from fluorescent tubes that flicker occasionally, creating shadows in the corners, especially when it's cloudy outside or beginning to rain. The concrete floor is gray, always kept clean, yet still bearing moisture marks accumulated over time. We have protocols for order, but somehow this place never feels welcoming. The shelves are stacked with various imported products, bottles, jars, boxes with foreign labels, imported food cans, cosmetics, detergents you can't find in regular supermarkets. Sometimes I end up staying alone because my colleague Elena has to lock herself in the office to prepare reports for the owner before closing. One night 3 years ago, something happened. I had just started working here and it was rainy season. That night I was alone. It was almost 9 o'clock. Nobody usually comes in at that hour. If someone does, it's either by mistake or because they didn't notice the time. I was crouched down arranging merchandise on a shelf when I felt a few drops of water fall onto my hands. I was startled, I won't lie. I screamed, lost my balance, and fell sitting against the boxes. There was a woman standing in front of me. She was soaking wet water dripping onto the floor, her hair stuck to her face, her black dress as if it had just been pulled from a river. She made no gesture to help me up, just stared at me. I asked if I could help her with something. I thought perhaps she was escaping the rain or had entered because she saw the light on. Nothing, she just observed me. Water ran from her fingers. She didn't blink. I stood up and asked again. Then she spoke, asking if she could stay for a moment until the rain outside subsided. I didn't know what to say. Something in her demeanor made me doubtful. It wasn't that she looked dangerous. It was more of a feeling. I told her we closed at 9, but that she could stay until then. I just asked her not to go beyond the entrance area to avoid getting everything wet. Afterward, I wanted to ask her to stay close, so I wouldn't forget she was there. But in the blink of an eye, the woman had vanished. When Elena came out of the office, she found me walking up and down the aisles looking for her. I was about to close and didn't want anyone to remain inside. The floor was still wet. I saw the trail of water. Not a puddle, but a path. One that wound between aisles as if she had slowly walked throughout the store. Elena went for the mop. When handing it to me, she asked what I was looking for. I told her about the woman, or started to tell her about her because I had only gotten halfway when she interrupted me with a no, so loud it froze me. "Never let her in. Never let her in," Elena said, her voice trembling. "But why?" I asked. I thought it was a thief or someone who had done something before who sneaked in and hid to spend the night in the store. Elena looked at me as if I had made a serious mistake. "That woman killed a child," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I swear to you, my entire skin broke out in goosebumps." Elena said it happened right outside the store about 10 years ago, that the woman killed the child by drowning him in a puddle on a rainy night just like tonight. "And if you think the story couldn't get worse," Elena continued, "after doing that, the woman threw herself into traffic and died right there on the road, crushed by several cars." I didn't want to believe it. I told her that made no sense. If that were true, then what had entered the store tonight wasn't a person. "Exactly," Elena said. "It's a restless soul, and she's asking for your permission to enter." I was truly frightened. That night I left all the lights on. I was too scared to walk alone to the back to turn them off. I felt that if I turned around, she would be standing there among the shadows, soaking wet. After that, I never wanted to stay alone again. I begged Elena to do the paperwork there with me in the sales area where I could see her. One day she showed me an old newspaper clipping. The images were brutal, but the description was worse. Both the woman and the child were found face down, drowned in pools of water, she on the avenue and the child on the sidewalk. Last month I learned more about the incident. I spent an entire afternoon at the local library searching through old copies of the local newspaper. Marisol Vega, that was her name. A 34-year-old single mother with a history of mental illness. Her son Carlos was only 6 years old. According to neighbors, Marisol believed her son was possessed by demons. She began performing strange rituals, sprinkling salt around his bed, hanging charms on the windows, and praying all night. She was fired from her job due to frequent absences and gradually became isolated, not contacting anyone except a local healer she met through an online group. That fateful night, the heaviest rain of the decade poured down on our city. Marisol led Carlos out of their apartment at midnight. A neighbor saw them leave but thought they might be heading to the hospital because the child didn't look well. Around 2 a.m, a taxi driver discovered Marisol kneeling beside a large puddle outside this warehouse. Yes, the very warehouse where I work now. When he stopped to check, she suddenly stood up and ran into traffic. 3 cars couldn't stop in time. When police arrived, they found Carlos lying face down in the puddle, already dead from drowning. A cleansing ritual, that's what the notes found in Marisol's apartment indicated. She believed water from rain during a lunar eclipse, there was indeed a partial eclipse that night, could purify the soul from demonic possession. But the ritual required the soul to temporarily leave the body, another way of saying, to make someone stop breathing until they're near death. But Marisol had held Carlos under the water too long. Now I always feel a cold presence in the warehouse whenever it rains. It's not just a feeling, there's actual evidence. Multiple times we've found water drip marks on the floor in the morning, although the roof doesn't leak. Initially, the store owner thought it was a plumbing issue and called repair workers several times, but they never found the cause. There are moments when I'm alone, rarely, but sometimes it's unavoidable when I feel like someone is watching me from the end of the hallway. I turn around, no one's there, but I hear the small drip, drip, drip of water. Last week, something horrific happened. I was doing inventory when I heard children's laughter coming from the back area. At first, I thought it was a customer who had brought their child, but as I walked through the aisles, I realized the store was empty. The laughter came again, this time closer, followed by the wet sound of someone stepping through puddles. "Carlos," I called out, not knowing why that name escaped my lips. The laughter stopped. A long silence. Then a whisper, not of a child but a woman. "It's not Carlos anymore. It's not my son anymore." I ran from the warehouse, stumbling twice before reaching the door. When Elena found me, I was huddled on the sidewalk, frozen with fear. I told her what I had heard, and for the first time I saw Elena truly afraid. Marisol wasn't just trying to cleanse Carlos, she whispered. According to the ritual she was following, if the child died during the cleansing, the demon wouldn't be expelled, it would become stronger, completely taking over the child's soul. For the first time, Elena admitted to me that she too had seen Marisol twice, always on rainy nights, always soaking wet. And each time she tried to ask permission to enter. "She's not looking for her son," Elena said. "She's trying to stop it. It's been here all along, hiding in the shadows of this warehouse, and it's growing stronger." Exactly 1 month after Marisol and Carlos died, another employee who worked here before Elena disappeared. She had locked up in the evening but never made it home. They found her car in the parking lot, keys still in the ignition, but no sign of her. It wasn't until a week later, after another heavy rain, that they found her body in a nearby drainage canal, face down, as if she had tried to drink the water until she died. A year later, a customer entered the warehouse just before closing on a rainy night. She never left. They found her purse abandoned near the checkout counter, but no trace of the woman herself until her body washed up on the shore of a lake miles away 2 days later. The authorities never connected the cases. Each death was considered isolated, a suicide, an accident. But Elena and I knew better, and now we understand why Marisol appears, why she asked permission to enter. She's trying to warn us, trying to prevent what used to be her son from claiming more victims. Elena and I have done research. We found the book that Marisol had used for her ritual sold back by a used book dealer in town. According to the book, the entity that possessed Carlos is now bound to the place where the cleansing occurred, and it needs to take 3 lives in water every 10 years to maintain its power. 2 people have died. Only 1 more to go. Last night, while closing under the first rain of the season, I heard water running from the bathroom. I opened the door and found all the taps turned on water flooding the floor. I hurried to turn them off, but when I turned back, I saw small, wet footprints leading from the bathroom out into the hallway. I followed them, my heart pounding in my chest. The footprints led to the office where Elena was alone doing the end-of-day reports. I ran there calling her name, but when I opened the door, the office was empty. The computer was still running, the coffee cup still warm, but Elena had vanished. And on the computer screen, typed into her report text, "It's not Carlos anymore, it's not my son anymore." And worse still, I realized a terrible truth. Today marks exactly 10 years since the deaths of Marisol and Carlos. A new cycle has begun, and I will be the first. Some places hold memories like water holds reflections, Dr. Ramirez from UCLA told me when I contacted her about our case. What you're describing matches dozens of accounts I've documented across the Americas, from the Rio Grande Valley to Patagonia. Spirits bound to water, especially rainwater, follow ancient patterns established in pre-Columbian rituals. I don't know if her anthropological perspective offers any comfort. All I know is that now, whenever I hear rain begin to fall on the warehouse roof, I also hear the soft patter of small footsteps walking between the aisles. Last night I found a stack of drawings in the break room, childlike drawings of stick figures floating face down in blue crayon puddles. When I showed the security guard, he checked the cameras. "No children have been in the store," he said, puzzled. Then he pointed to something on the screen. At 3:17 a.m., the cameras captured all the lights in the warehouse turning on simultaneously. And in the flickering fluorescent light, a small figure moved between the aisles, dragging something that left a wet trail behind it. I'm sharing this story because I know I'm not alone in experiencing this. If you've ever seen mysterious watermarks appearing in your home or heard children laughing when it rains, maybe you too have encountered something that exists in that liminal space where water connects our world to another. And if you're ever in a store late at night when it's raining and a soaking wet woman asks for permission to enter, remember, she might not be the one you should fear. It's what follows her that you should truly dread. Because in the end, water doesn't just cleanse. Sometimes it preserves what should have been washed away. And sometimes when it rains, those things come back. The Monastery Ritual Revised. Recording begins. If you're listening to this, I'm probably already gone. My name is Miguel, and I have less than an hour before they come for me. I'm recording this as a warning. If you have an unexplained scar that appeared after visiting an ancient religious site, or headaches whenever it rains, perhaps you too have become a witness. What I'm about to tell you happened years ago, but tonight the cycle completes itself. Sound of rain hitting the window. It all began when I was 12 years old, when my sister Isabella got married. I was 12 when my sister Isabella got married. Do you retain memories from that age in your life? I don't remember the wedding, not the dress, not the guests, not the party. I don't even think I was present for most of it. Perhaps I was feeling unwell, or maybe I was just bored and went to lock myself in the car, as I used to do during long events. What I remember very clearly was something that happened a few months before the wedding, when my mother, Sophia, and I went to see the chapel where Isabella would get married. Not an ordinary venue. It was a monastery, one of those ancient large ones with enclosed courtyards, damp walls, and gardens that smell of wet earth. Normally they didn't rent the place for events, but my grandmother, when she was still alive, had donated a piece of land to the nuns, an act of faith, as she called it, and the nuns had promised to repay the favor someday. This was their repayment, letting her granddaughter get married in this beautiful place. And it was truly beautiful, peaceful, as if suspended in another time. I was surprised that something like this existed without people talking more about it, without it appearing in magazines or on tourist tours, though I also thought perhaps that was better. Sometimes places remain intact precisely because nobody visits them. My mother said that although they would lend us the place, there were still things we had to pay for. The nuns didn't want to charge, but they couldn't give it away for free either. We went on a weekday. A persistent drizzle was falling, the kind that makes no noise but soaks everything. Gray sky, warm puddles, everything smelled of stone-fallen leaves and petrichor. Arriving there gave you a strange feeling. The final road was unpaved with sharp curves flanked by tall trees and undergrowth that seemed to grow uncontrolled. From afar, we could already see the building before arriving, large and made of old stone like a fortress. There wasn't much noise, just the sound of light rain falling on leaves and the crunch of gravel under shoes. When we arrived, the place was imposing. There were very high walls, heavy wooden gates, and a central courtyard with a fountain that didn't seem to have worked in years. Everything was very clean, very orderly, but also very empty. There was no music, no nuns in sight, no sounds of activity. It was as if the monastery didn't know someone had arrived. The vegetation was well maintained, but rigid as if they trimmed it out of obligation. There were cypresses, dry bougainvillea, perfectly trimmed hedges, all very symmetrical. The light was so dim that it seemed later than it actually was. The interior was cool and quiet. The ceilings were very high and made of stone. The thick walls made any step or word echo, though not too loudly. There was a smell of dampness, of extinguished wax and old wood. The windows were few, and some had stained glass that barely let the light through. There were spacious rooms, empty stone benches, small altars without candles, crosses without flowers. What was most noticeable was the silence, a silence that wasn't natural, as if someone cultivated it. The sky was completely black. When we left home, there were just a few distant clouds, the kind that don't threaten and only paint the day gray. My mother had to stop by some offices inside the monastery to leave a deposit. She said she wouldn't take long. I sat on a bench in the central courtyard just looking at everything. The courtyard was perfect symmetrical square surrounded by stone arches and covered corridors. After about 20 minutes I heard a scream. Not an ordinary scream, it was harrowing from someone who wasn't pretending. I stood up immediately. Other people heard it too. I saw 3 or 4 people moving in the same direction, but I didn't dare follow them. I didn't know what to do. Before I could finish deciding, a terrible lightning bolt struck. The entire place trembled and the lights went out in a second. The drizzle that had been falling turned into a fierce storm with wind and large drops that bounced off the stones. I ran to take shelter under the arches. The nuns appeared from nowhere. They began to move quickly with ancient lanterns in their hands. They lit torches placed on the walls. The fire illuminated the monastery in flickering rhythms, leaving long shadows that looked like people standing still. The Mother Superior called my mother to speak privately. I didn't hear everything, but understood the essentials. She told her it would be better if we didn't leave that with this type of rain, the river floods, that every year someone dies. They offered us rooms in a guest house they had within the monastery itself. My mother tried to call home, but there was no signal. The lights were out and the landlines weren't working. She wanted to notify that we wouldn't be returning. This had her upset and worried. It was getting darker and the storm wasn't subsiding. We ate dinner there and went to bed early. The beds were hard but clean. There was a cross on the wall and a candle on the nightstand. My mother stayed in an adjoining bedroom. I knew she wasn't sleeping, though she made no sound. I could feel her anxiety, as if it filtered under the door. At around 2 a.m., I heard her door open. I thought she was going to the bathroom. I waited for her to return, wanting to get up and talk to her, tell her that I couldn't sleep either. But an hour passed, the clock struck 3, and she still hadn't returned. Could she have left? I jumped up with an uncomfortable feeling in my chest. I thought perhaps she had decided to risk going alone, stepping out on the road, finding a signal in the rain, and notifying home that we wouldn't return but that we were fine. I put on my shoes, opened the bedroom door, and stepped into the hallway. It was cold. There was a smell of wax and dampness. And then I saw it. In the central courtyard under the storm there was a bonfire burning, a tall, vivid fire at the exact center of the cloister. The fire hurt my eyes. It was too bright, almost white. When I finally adjusted to the light, I saw what was around it. Women kneeling. They were the nuns. They had their heads bowed, hands on their thighs, as if praying, but this wasn't a prayer. On the other side of the bonfire, hanging on a black wooden cross, there was something, a figure not entirely human. It had the shape of a man, but it wasn't. It was larger, covered with thick hair all over its body, even on its face. It looked like a deformed Christ alive. It breathed heavily, its eyes were closed, but its mouth moved. It laughed. Among all of them I saw my mother. She had her back turned, also kneeling. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to move, but I couldn't. A woman approached her. She had her head covered with a black cloth. Suddenly all those present began to sing. It wasn't a church song, but a kind of ancient psalm. What was happening there wasn't Catholic. It felt satanic, demonic. The crucified creature opened its eyes, looked directly at me, red eyes, intense like embers. Then I felt something hit me hard on the forehead. I don't know if it was a look or a force, but the pain went straight to the back of my neck. Everything spun around me. I lost my balance. I don't know if I fell or if someone pushed me from inside my head. I only know that I passed out and knew no more. I woke up in the hospital. My mother was sitting by the bed. She saw me open my eyes and breathe deeply, as if she had been holding her breath for hours. My father and sister were outside. They didn't come in until after my mother spoke with me. It was the first thing she did. She told me not to ask questions, that we needed to agree on what we would say, that if someone asked what had happened, I should answer one of two things. Either we had been assaulted, they took us to a house and did what they did to us there, or that I preferred not to talk about the matter at this time. I chose the latter. My mother apparently did too, because later when I directly asked her what had happened that night, she said the same thing: "Son, I don't want to talk about it." Even after the wedding, when everything had passed, when we were all fine, I still insisted and asked her why she hadn't said anything, why she hadn't told the truth to my father or Isabella. And the only thing she answered was to not ruin Isabella's wedding. The memory of that night remains with me as if it were etched in my mind, as if I were watching an old movie. I couldn't talk about it with anyone. Even remembering it frightened me. I also couldn't ask questions. There was no one to ask. And no one, not even doctors or psychologists, could explain to me why, since that day, my head hurts whenever it rains. A key piece unexpectedly appeared. One afternoon my mother and Isabella were arguing. I was there. It was during lunch. Isabella blamed my mother for having been so quiet and distant during the wedding. Apparently she had kept the complaint for several months. My mother's mood at the wedding was apparently evident to everyone. To everyone except me, who also wasn't 100% present at the party. Isabella also complained to me about why I hadn't gone if something was wrong with me, why nobody said anything. And then my mother stood up and pulled up her blouse, showing Isabella her back, just like that. "This, do you think it happened by itself?" she said. And there were the scars, long, thick, poorly healed marks of real whips, not movie ones. "This is what happened to us the day we went to pay for what they did to your brother," she said. Both looked at me. There was a horrible silence, and they stopped arguing. I only had one question in my head, but I didn't even know how to ask it. A few days later, another idea occurred to me. "When was the last time you saw the back of your own head?" "I went to get a haircut. I asked for it to be cut very short. I noticed the barber was staring intently while working back there, and he wasn't the only one. A customer stopped, looked at me, and then left as if nothing had happened. When he finished, the barber passed the mirror behind as usual for me to check the cut. And then I saw it, a large, perfect scar, across but inverted. That's what hurts when it rains, the scar. And no, I don't know if someday I'll truly understand what happened that night. I don't know who or what that crucified creature was. I don't know why they did this to us. I don't know if it was a warning, a punishment, or a mistake. I just know that whenever it rains at night, I dream of it, of the bonfire of the chance, and of those red eyes looking at me from the fire. I wake up with my neck burning as if the memory had touched me again. Maybe I'll never understand it. Maybe I'm not supposed to understand. 2 weeks later, during a heavy rainstorm, I woke up at 3 a.m. with the familiar ache in my head. I sat up in bed, massaging my painful neck with my hand. A bright flash of lightning illuminated my bedroom window, and in that flash I saw someone standing in the corner of the room. A tall, dark figure with glowing red eyes staring straight at me. I screamed and turned on the light, but the room was empty. I told myself it was just a hallucination, a nightmare bleeding into reality. I couldn't get back to sleep, so I decided to go down to the kitchen for some water. As I passed by Isabella's room, she had now moved out and lived with her husband. I heard whispering. The door was slightly ajar, and I saw my mother inside, kneeling on the floor. Was she praying? No, she was drawing something on the floor with chalk. A large circle with strange symbols inside, similar to what I had seen on the floor of the monastery that night beneath the fire. I stepped back, trying not to make a sound, but the old wooden floor creaked under my feet. My mother turned her head, eyes wide with fear or perhaps anger. She stood and moved toward the door. I didn't wait to see what would happen. I ran back to my room and locked the door. The next morning I gathered the courage to check Isabella's room, but the floor was clean. No circle, no marks of drawing. At breakfast my mother behaved as if nothing had happened, but I noticed a look in her eyes, a watchful, vigilant look. A few days later I met a family friend, Padre Joaquin, an elderly priest who had known our family for many years. I decided to ask him about the monastery. His reaction chilled me. He looked around as if to make sure no one was listening, then whispered, "That monastery was officially closed by the Catholic Church in 1897. No nuns have been allowed to perform any rituals there for over a century. The place is forbidden." "But we were there," I insisted. "My sister got married there." Padre Joaquin shook his head, his face sad. "No, my son. Your sister's wedding took place at Santa Maria Church. I officiated." I rushed home and searched for Isabella's wedding photo album. I flipped through each page, looked at each photograph, and Padre Joaquin was right. The wedding had taken place in an ordinary church, not in a monastery. I didn't understand. I remembered the trip to the monastery, the rain, the ritual, everything. Or I thought I remembered. When I touched the scar on my neck, it still ached. That wasn't imagination. The inverted cross marks the witness, el testigo, who carries a piece of the entity within them. Professor Martinez told me when I finally found someone who would listen. Similar rituals have been documented in abandoned missions across the Americas, particularly in places with Spanish colonial history. In the weeks that followed, I researched as much as I could about the mysterious monastery. I discovered that it had indeed been a real monastery, but had been abandoned after a horrific incident in the late 19th century. According to local stories, the nuns had performed a forbidden ritual, a ritual with origins in pre-Christian beliefs of the region. This ritual, called el sacrificio del testigo. The sacrifice of the witness required the presence of an innocent person, a witness, to observe the ritual. The witness would be marked with the inverted sign of faith, and from then on they would carry a part of the entity known as el testigo, the witness within them. According to legend, each such marking provided the entity with additional power, allowing it to continue existing in our world. And the chosen witness had to have a connection to an upcoming marriage, another sacred ritual. In my searches, I discovered something horrifying. Every member of my family on my mother's bloodline bore the same mark. And they had all become witnesses before an important wedding in the family. Now I understood why my mother had been silent, why she never spoke about that night. It wasn't to protect Isabella from the horrible news. It was because Isabella already knew. They all knew. This was a family tradition, an obligation passed down from generation to generation. Recording continues. Tonight is my 18th birthday. In our bloodline, that's when the final ritual happens. But I found something they don't know. An older text describing how to break the cycle. It requires another sacrifice, but not the one they expect. Sound of footsteps approaching. I can hear them coming up the stairs now. My mother, my father, Isabella, her husband. Their eyes will have that vacant look. They'll take me to the monastery that shouldn't exist to complete what was started 6 years ago. Heavy knocking at the door. If you bear the mark and you're hearing this, find the text. It's hidden in the archives of Santa Maria Church behind the painting of Saint. Door bursts open. "Miguel, it's time," my father's voice, but somehow not his voice. I look up from the recorder, seeing them all standing in my doorway. Their eyes glow red in the dim light of my bedroom. Outside, rain pounds against the windows. "I'm ready," I say, pressing stop on the recorder and sliding it under my mattress. The small book I found in the church archives is hidden in my jacket pocket. The text describes a way to turn the ritual against the entity, to sacrifice the vessel, not the witness. They lead me to the car. As we drive through the storm, my head pounds worse than ever before. Through flashes of lightning, I see the monastery appear on the hilltop. Impossible, yet there it stands. The nuns wait at the gates, faces hidden beneath hoods. In the courtyard, the bonfire is already burning. As they drag me toward the Black Cross, I see a small figure standing in the rain, my cousin, only 12 years old. Our eyes meet, and I see the fear and confusion I felt 6 years ago. He has been brought to witness. But tonight the cycle ends. I reach into my pocket, feeling the ancient text. Tonight, either I free our bloodline from this curse, or I become what I've feared all along. The Mother Superior steps forward, a black cloth in hand. I glimpse her face beneath the hood and see my mother's eyes staring back at me. "The witness becomes the vessel," she intones. "The vessel becomes eternal." And as they bind me to the cross, I begin to recite the words I've memorized, not their ritual, but mine. The rain falls harder, the fire burns white, and the truth becomes clear sometimes. To break a curse, you must become it first. The final witness revised. Have you ever felt that moment of dread when rain starts falling on an unfamiliar road at night? When headlights in your rearview mirror seem to follow you too closely? There's a reason for that instinctual fear. Some roads have histories written in blood and water, histories that repeat themselves endlessly. My name is Diego, and I was 22 when it all happened. At that time, I lived near Azteca Stadium in Mexico City. My sister Valentina and I would go out every weekend with our friends. Somehow all my friends ended up dating all of Valentina's friends, so we were always together and frequently attended parties that Valentina found through a website. You could call them underground parties, but they weren't really that extreme. They played music, sold drinks, held silly contests, raffled bottles. You can imagine. Nothing extraordinary, but at that moment, it was all we needed. Since none of us had a car, it was always the same challenge, figuring out transportation, finding someone to convince who lived closest, who would handle the taxis, or whether we should just not go. Sometimes we'd stay overnight wherever we could. One day, Marcos's father went on vacation and left his truck at home. Obviously, he hid the keys, but my friend found them. That was the time we decided to go to a party in Cuernavaca, all 10 of us. It was a truck with an adapted bed in the back. 7 of us fit back there without a problem. Valentina and Marcos's girlfriend Lucia went in front with him. The rest of us sat in the back among backpacks, jackets, and bottles wrapped in cloth so they wouldn't make noise. Today, years later, I recognize all the implications of the decisions we made that night, but at the time, my mind always told me nothing bad would happen. Until it did. The arrival in Cuernavaca was normal. 3 hours without issue, humid heat, loud music, laughter. The party was good until Lucia got a call from her mother saying her grandmother had taken ill. They were at the hospital and she should better return. Marcos's girlfriend wanted to leave immediately. Not very willingly, but Marcos was going to drive her in the truck. She gathered her things and started saying goodbye to everyone. I remember that right at that moment the party was starting to get better, but I had no way to get back. I didn't bring more money. Valentina barely had about 70 pesos, and I hadn't even told my parents I'd gone out, much less that I was in another state. Valentina wanted to stay, but we had an agreement, right? We went together, and we returned together. Her boyfriend stayed, which is why she was in a bad mood. Erica and David returned too. There were 6 of us, me in the truck bed, frustrated but trying not to think foolish thoughts. I tried to calm down. I reminded myself that if it had been my family, I would have returned too. We left the neighborhood and hit the road. Not long after, through the small window connecting the bed to the cabin, Marcos told us we were going to take the free highway. He said it was because he didn't feel in condition to take the toll road. And the truth is, I wasn't in any condition to drive either. I was more drunk, and none of the others knew how to drive. I nonetheless suggested we call a taxi for Lucia, let her go alone, but there was an awkward silence. She probably took it personally and thought I wanted to abandon her. In any case, Marcos continued on his way and stepped on the gas. We were going over 120 kilometers per h. After about 20 minutes, a car caught up with us. We all noticed because it was flashing its lights. The worst part was that instead of letting it pass, Marcos accelerated even more. I was already with my heart in my throat. The others, as if nothing was happening, blindly trusted that my friend had everything under control. The car pulled up alongside us, flashed its lights again, and then a siren sounded. At that moment I thought it was the best thing that could happen because it had just started raining hard, and at the speed we were going an accident was brushing right up against us. How wrong I was. We had to pull over. Those of us in the back didn't even raise our heads. The first thing the officer asked my friend was if he had been drinking while driving. It was obvious, but he still asked to see what he would say. He asked for the car papers. I heard Lucia telling him we were in a hurry because of her grandmother. The man replied that he was very sorry, but that it would be very difficult to let us go. Until that point, he didn't know we had several people in the truck bed. That information, when it came out, would complicate everything. Then Marcos, not at all discreet, opened the window and asked us if we had money to offer the cop. You know what he achieved with that? The man forced him to get out hand over the keys and open the truck bed. I thought if the rain gets heavier, maybe we can run away. Maybe that would make him give up. It was a stupid thought, but it was all I had left. All of us were in trouble, but the guy with no license, no parental permission, driving drunk with 3 people in the truck bed. The man put Valentina and Lucia in the patrol car and told Marcos to follow him. And if we escape, Marcos said, trying to sound funny. I punched him in the face. Are you going to leave my sister there? I asked, my voice dropping low. We followed the patrol car for about 15 minutes on the highway. Then it turned onto a dirt road. If it weren't for the sirens, we wouldn't have seen anything. The road was pitch black, full of deep puddles, ups and downs, without any signs, with nothing around. It was like that for about 40 minutes, and we weren't going to the impound lot or the police station or any official place. That much was clear. When we finally arrived, Valentina got out of the patrol car saying that Lucia had become rude, and that's why they were going to detain us. It was then that everything suddenly became clear. That man wasn't a police officer. The patrol car wasn't a patrol car. It was an ordinary car with an improvised light on the roof, and the man wore neither a badge nor a uniform, just a dark shirt and a gun in his hand. He fired into the air to make it clear. In front of us was an abandoned building, a brick shell without windows or doors. That's where he had taken us. I think we were all crying except for Marcos, who in a moment of distraction tried to escape. He didn't get far. About 30 meters away, he got tangled in barbed wire that wasn't visible in the darkness. He fell face first to the ground with a dry sound. We had to drag him back all under the rain, and there we were soaking wet, freezing, with an armed man pointing a gun at us, telling us to go get our friend. The place where they detained us, or rather kidnapped us, was indeed a prison, but an abandoned prison, minimal, with no trace of legal operation. Just 3 cells with rusty bars that creaked with each gust of wind. Everything smelled of old confinement, rancid humidity, dried urine, and walls that had rotted from the inside. The floor was stained with mud and something darker that we didn't want to identify. The air was dense, as if it hadn't been ventilated in years. The light came from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling that swayed with the currents that filtered through the holes in the walls. It was cold, not climate cold, but the cold of a cursed place. They put us all in one cell and threw Marcos into another. He was still half unconscious, not knowing where he was. They threw him in there like a bag of wet clothes. Lucia lost her head. She was screaming at the fake cop that she hoped his grandmother would die, that we would sue him, that he didn't know who he was messing with. Nonsense, but with a rage that made her tremble. I just wanted her to be quiet, because at that point it wasn't clear if they would leave us alive. The man said nothing, closed the bars with a loud bang, closed the main door, got in his car, and left. We remained silent for a few seconds, then we began to scream. We all screamed as if that would serve some purpose, as if someone would pass by this forgotten building and decide to help us. We were like that, I don't know how long, half an hour. Erica and David cried nonstop. Long sobs, chest tremors. They had trouble breathing. No one said anything useful, only that this couldn't be happening, that everything would be fine. Pure lies, lies. 2 hours passed. Outside it kept raining. A constant, stubborn rain that sounded like a movie background. Inside no one was talking anymore. And then a voice was heard, Marcos's voice. He was lying face down, barely regaining consciousness. He spoke with difficulty, but his voice was very clear. "Don't look at the cell across the way, don't look at it. But there's someone there watching us." We froze. No one said anything, but we did exactly the opposite of what he told us. All 5 of us looked up at the same time, and yes, there was a figure leaning against the wall of the opposite cell. It didn't move, it just watched. The light didn't hit it directly, but you could distinguish the eyes. They didn't shine, they didn't blink, they were dark, empty, fixed. The face seemed human, but not completely. It was too elongated, too quiet. It didn't breathe, didn't say anything. It wasn't noticeable if it was alive or if it had simply been there for years. I felt something sink into my stomach as if someone had poured ice water inside me. We didn't know if it was a person, an apparition, or something else, but it was watching us. The man didn't speak or move, neither did Marcos. He was still lying on the floor, face down, head to one side, unconscious, and yet it was he who was speaking. He told us that the man, the one in the other cell, had told him everything, that they had just left us there to die, that unless we could tear out the bars or kick down the walls, no one would know about us for the next 3 years. We would die of hunger or desperation, that he too had been left there, that he had been imprisoned for 3 years. We didn't know if it was a joke from Marcos, but it didn't sound like one, especially not at that moment. Moreover, the other man really was there. We saw him. There really was someone there. The man stood up. We backed away. At the same time, he walked toward the bars and spoke. His voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't used it in a long time. He told us that Marcos was lying, that he had told him everything, but with a difference. He said we wouldn't die of hunger, that the fake cop would return, that he would return for the women first, that we would never see them again. And then it would be our turn, unless— He fell silent. He looked like a statue, another part of this damp and rotten prison. "Unless someone stays to take my place," he finally said. And by that he didn't mean a punishment, not being locked up. He was referring to death or killing. He looked at all of us and said, "If you want, it can be him. It was his fault. He brought you here." We all understood he was referring to Marcos. Unexpectedly, Lucia said yes. No one else said anything. The man stepped back. He disappeared for a moment in the shadow. Then he returned wielding a gun. He stuck it through the bars, stretched his arm as far as he could, and fired. I never heard the cell doors open, but from one moment to the next they were open. Also Marcos, the man's. I didn't go near to check on my friend for fear that the cell door would close behind me. I didn't dare touch him. I only saw how a red puddle began to form under his body. We left just like that, out of nowhere. So easy it seemed like a bad dream, but it wasn't. One of our friends died in front of us, and I don't know how Lucia will carry that. She was the one who said yes. We hid among the trees until dawn, then a while longer until we understood that no one would come for us. Marcos's father's truck stayed there. No one dared to go back to look for the keys in the dead man's pockets. When we reached the highway, Lucia left. Her grandmother was priority one, and although her boyfriend was no longer with us, she got into a taxi and disappeared. We returned home not knowing what to do. Should we say something to the police, to Marcos's father? That man was on vacation. Even so, the authorities forced us to take them to the place deep down the road to that building. When we arrived at the site, we were about to enter, but they pulled us out almost immediately. The smell was unbearable. There was a body, only one, and it wasn't Marcos. His blood was there, the puddle, the trace, but there was no body. The one who was there was the man from the cell, the one who spoke to us, the one who let us go. His corpse was in a very advanced state of decomposition. Just by looking at it, they said he had been dead for years, that it was impossible that he had done anything. There was no trace of Marcos. What he lost in blood, they said, wasn't enough for him to have died. Not there, not like that. He's been missing since then, and we stopped going to those parties, at least Valentina and I. We were grounded for a full year. 3 months after the incident, when the police had given up searching for Marcos, I received a strange message. An unidentified phone number sent me GPS coordinates and the text, "If you want to know the truth, come alone." I shouldn't have gone. Part of me knew that, but the obsession with what had happened that night hadn't let me sleep for weeks. I needed answers. I didn't tell anyone about the message, not Valentina, not any of our remaining friends. The coordinates led to a small restaurant on the outskirts of Mexico City, not far from where we were captured. When I arrived, it had started to rain, a persistent rain like that night. Inside, sitting alone in the furthest corner, was Lucia. She looked different, thinner eyes, sunken, as if she hadn't slept for weeks. When I sat down, she didn't even greet me. She just pushed a folder toward me. "It wasn't the first time it happened," she said, her voice monotone. "Not the first time, and not the last." I opened the folder and found articles cut from old newspapers. All talked about people disappearing along that stretch of highway, always groups of young friends, always on rainy nights, and always a single survivor who returned to tell the story. The articles spanned decades, the oldest from the 1970s. "I've done research," Lucia said. "That prison, it used to be a secret detention facility during the Guerra Sucia Dirty War. They tortured and killed political dissidents there. The government never acknowledged its existence." "But the man in the cell, the body," I began. "Luis Acosta," Lucia interrupted. "He was a journalist investigating the disappearances, disappeared in 1989, never found until now." "And the fake cop?" I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. "Nobody knows who he is," Lucia answered, "or what happened to Marcos. But did you notice anything about the survivors in all these cases?" I flipped through the articles again. Always one person, the storyteller. And when I looked more closely at the photos, I realized something horrifying. The survivors in the most recent cases looked strangely familiar. Not exactly the same, but something about their eyes. "The survivors are never found afterward," Lucia said, her voice now just a whisper. "They tell their story and then disappear. Like I will after tonight." She stood to leave, but I grabbed her wrist. "Wait, why did you choose Marcos? Why not one of us?" Lucia looked at me, her eyes suddenly hollow. "Because I already knew. That man told me when we were in the patrol car. There's only one way to end the cycle, one soul to replace another soul, and it always has to be the driver." When she pulled her hand back, I saw a faint mark on her wrist, a symbol I didn't recognize. Lucia walked out into the rain, and I never saw her again. 2 days later, she was reported missing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that I was missing a crucial part of the story. A few weeks later, I began investigating deeper. I found that the prison had once been part of a larger system of secret detention facilities where hundreds had disappeared. But there were older stories about the location, stories from before it became a prison. It had once been the site of an ancient Aztec ritual, where victims were sacrificed to appease Tlaloc, the rain god. According to legend, the souls of those sacrificed remained bound to the site, forced to collect new souls whenever it rained. But what chilled me most was when I found a document about the ritual. It described the cycle. The first entity chooses a host, the driver. It then invites others to the sacrificial site. One of them must voluntarily sacrifice the host so the others may live. The one who makes that choice becomes el testigo, the witness who will carry the entity's soul until the next cycle. I couldn't sleep when I realized this. Lucia wasn't simply the one who agreed to sacrifice Marcos. She had been part of it from the beginning. She was the witness from the previous cycle, and she had led us there. But if Lucia had been the witness, and now she had disappeared, then who? I was looking in the mirror on a rainy night when I realized the truth. In the dark bathroom, a flash of lightning, and for a moment I didn't recognize my own face. The eyes looking back at me weren't mine. They were dark, empty, fixed, like the eyes of the man in the cell. I began having blackouts, missing time I couldn't account for. I'd wake up in my car on unfamiliar roads in the rain. I found mud under my fingernails and couldn't remember where it came from. And worst of all, I began seeing Marcos in my dreams, injured but still alive, trapped somewhere waiting. When I woke from these dreams, I always found myself muttering the same phrase, "It needs 3 more, 3 more, and I'll be free." The rain hasn't stopped for the past week. I can't sleep, can't eat. I know something is happening to me and I can't stop it. I've started remembering things about that night that I had forgotten or been made to forget. The truth is, Lucia wasn't the only one who said yes in the prison. I did too. When the gun fired, it wasn't just her choice, it was ours. And now both of us carry a part of the entity. Or perhaps it carries a part of us. Tonight, if it rains and the weather forecast says there will be a major storm, I know I'll lead another group to the old prison. I know the cycle will repeat. But there's a horrific truth I've only just discovered, a missing detail in all the stories. Marcos isn't dead. No one really dies in the sacrificial ritual. They become part of the prison, part of the walls of the bars of the damp air. They're forced to witness, forced to experience the same horrific night over and over again with each cycle. And with each cycle, the entity takes 3 more souls. I found a small piece of paper hidden in a wall of the prison when I returned there, written in handwriting I recognized as Marcos's. It's not a prison for humans, it's a prison for something older, something buried when the Spanish came. They built the prison over its temple, thinking it would contain it. Instead, they gave it more victims. Every soul tortured here makes it stronger, and now it's nearly strong enough to escape. Tonight is another dreaded night, another rainy night, and I can feel it pulling me back to that road. I'm trying to resist, but my will is weakening. I know why the new group of 5, the ones I've been following, seem familiar. One of them is Marcos's cousin. Not coincidence. Nothing is coincidence. I've written all this down in the hope that someone will read it. Someone will understand and maybe break the cycle. If you're reading this, be careful of the roads you travel on rainy nights. Be careful of who you trust. And if you ever find yourself on a deserted road stopped by a police officer, remember that not all prisons are made of bars and walls. Sometimes a prison is an inescapable cycle, a cycle that has played out for hundreds of years and will continue long after I'm gone. And when you look into the eyes of the driver, remember they aren't always who you think they are. As I finish writing this, I glance at the mirror on my desk. For a moment I see not my reflection, but Marcos' pale, soaking wet, empty eyes. Then the image shifts and I see myself, but not as I am now. This version has hollow eyes and a knowing smile. It's me from the future after I've completed my part in the cycle. That's the final truth no one knows. We're never truly free. We just become witnesses to new souls trapped in the same eternal nightmare. And outside my